Hello, everybody. I am Tristan Wolf. I'm the STEM Outreach Program Manager for the Naval Surface Warfare Center Philadelphia Division. In the background there, I chose the name Making Waves for this presentation, but I'm also a fluid dynamicist, so I had to have a little bit of fluid dynamicist fun. Technically, a wave is a Kelvin-Helmholtz instability. It's my favorite fluid instability. I know that you all have yours. Mine's actually tattooed on my arm. That's how deep my nerddom goes. We're going to talk a little bit about opportunities and resources for educators, not just within the Philadelphia area, but really nationally as well. I'm going to share some lessons learned in establishing a STEM outreach program within my organization, and I think that that is probably applicable to other businesses and things as well if you're interested in trying to establish or increase the STEM outreach that you do within your organizations. And then we're also just going to play around with some STEM demonstrations in a bit. All right, so what is the Naval Surface Warfare Center Philadelphia Division? I'm not going to read all that. That's a bunch of words. And this is the problem that I have. So my challenge is that I have to explain to children what it is that we do. And this is our official description. It's very long. It's like a giant ongoing one large sentence. What we do really is machinery systems on ships. So basically, if it's in a Navy ship, we're responsible for it. So that could be anything between machinery systems, electrical systems, control systems, the cybersecurity systems that really protect all of that and pull it off so that we can complete the mission of the individual Navy ships. Now, actually, what we do is a lot more complicated than just that. Because we're dealing with so many different systems, we're dealing with anything as complex or new as hybrid electric drives, or something as not or as simple as like a washing machine on a submarine. So it really is a full range of things that we're into. So I'm going to talk about opportunities first. We have a lot of different programs that we support, and the ones I'm going to really highlight here are primarily national programs. So within the Department of Navy, it doesn't really matter where you are within the United States, and actually some of these programs are actually international programs as well. We have Perch, Sea Glide, Roboboat, and RoboSub. So I've got a little graphic there off to the left, which highlights which of those programs are at the different grade levels. So for Perch, that spans both middle school, high school. Sea Glide dips a little bit into middle school, but is primarily a high school program. And I would say that one is primarily concentrated within the city of Philadelphia, but we're looking to expand that program into a national program. It just so happens that the Perch program was the U.S. Navy's first underwater naval robotics STEM education program, and it was started in Philadelphia. The competition started in Philadelphia and ultimately grew into an international competition. We're looking to do the same thing with Sea Glide. At the collegiate level, we have two different programs that we're supporting. There's actually a third one that's not listed there as well that universities can apply to and form teams. We do help schools and universities get started with some seed funding, and we also provide mentorship at the collegiate level, and that's Roboboat and RoboSub. And then there's a third program called Robotics, which I don't have listed there, but that is a land, sea, air event. So it's really three different systems that all have to be interconnected and talk to each other to pull off a mission. So what is Perch? Perch is a remotely operated vehicle. It's constructed from a lot of pretty simple materials like PVC pipes, hobby motors, pool noodles, and things like that. So it's pretty simple components. The most terrifying thing is that we're sticking soldering irons in the hands of middle school students. So we do offer training, and we are serious about the safety aspects of that training as well. This year, we're looking to amp up training, not just locally within Philadelphia, but actually nationally as well. So you might see more training opportunities for educators available. We also work with schools and nonprofits and community organizations to provide kits so that students can start building these things and take place in whatever your local competition might be. And then we also, within the Department of Navy, we provide mentorship. And for my organization, which again is concentrated on these machinery systems on Navy ships, we have about 2,700 employees, and the majority of those employees are scientists and engineers. So we have a lot of different scientists and engineers within Philadelphia, and quite possibly the most, I don't really know, that are available within Philadelphia for mentorship, but also nationally. We work with all the different Navy labs across the country to coordinate things. What else? Sea Glide is a autonomous underwater vehicle. So Perch is kind of shown going through that loop down in the bottom right picture, and you kind of see a CAD drawing version of it on the top right. That program last year, because of the pandemic, we had to move to a virtual construct. And then the question became, how do you pull off an underwater robotics competition virtually? And so we started really leaning into tools like Tinkercad, things that were accessible via a browser, but still had some kind of robust components to it to invite students to kind of dive more into the engineering design process and more into the digital engineering realm, which, by the way, is a growing area of not just our business, but really the business of engineering in general. For Sea Glide, like I said, that's an autonomous vehicle. That one's actually based in Arduino. It's housed basically in a water bottle, and it has a little piston that pulls water in and out. And it basically does a sinusoidal motion underneath the water, and that's how it propels itself forward. In that center picture there, you see that's a picture of University of Puerto Rico, which is one of the schools that we support at NSWC Philadelphia. So even though we're located in Philadelphia, obviously not Puerto Rico, we do support schools and universities outside of our local area as well. So that's a picture of their RoboSub competition vehicle from, I believe, last year. This is a video from our competition from a couple years ago. First thing you're going to see is the Perch vehicles kind of going through an underwater obstacle course. The competition's really fun. We have mascot dance-offs. It's housed at Temple University, who sponsors us. But one of the things that I mentioned is that we're not only doing a competition, but we're also doing training events for educators and students. And so the picture on the left there is actually from one of our training events for Sea Glide. Sea Glide's a 2-day training for programming, as well as a 2-day training for building the vehicle. Perch is just a single-day training event for the vehicle itself. It's a lot of fun. I don't want to talk too much about this. It's not just the obstacle course. There's also a mission side of the course. You see that now. What they're doing right here is they're actually playing an underwater version of the game Battleship. So they're trying to find which holes they need to cover up with these little, basically they're just PVC caps that fit over a photoresistor. Photoresistor is just trying to see if it's covered up or not. If they've covered up the right ones, it'll send up a little indicator light, which tells them to go on to the next part of the mission. By the way, this mission, as complex as it is, you can see all the different underwater components here as this video progresses. He's going to touch a little sensor here in a second and release a torpedo, which is going to sink a battleship and then let off a giant and kind of gets the folks who are in the stands involved as well. There goes the torpedo, and then that's the underwater cannon going off. So you can see it's a very complex system, and that actually changes it every year. So I'm going to move on to FIRST Robotics. This isn't a program that's really new to a lot of people. A lot of people do FIRST Robotics or aware of FIRST Robotics. If you're not aware, go check it out. It's a really great program. It spans from elementary school through high school. FIRST Robotics competition is kind of like the big robots you might think of in terms of a robot. First Tech Challenge gets a little bit smaller. It's kind of more of an erector set kind of build, but a kind of a bigger version of an erector set build. And then at the elementary and kind of dipping into middle school levels is First Lego League. And all of those robots are designed in Lego. So First Lego League Discover, pre-K through 1 is for basically Lego Duplos. If this is a new program, as of last year, they started during a pandemic, kind of a hard time to start, but this is, we're hoping to grow that program pretty soon. First Lego League Explore is grades 2 through 4. It's really a lot of fun. It's more about exploring different types of science and technology. This year's theme is transportation. So they're going to be talking a lot about transportation. And then First Lego League Challenge is what I would say actually a more complicated version or a complicated mission than First Tech Challenge, which is at the high school level, which is crazy. The mission is very complex for that one. Again, we offer training. We offer grants. And again, these are national. So not just local in Philadelphia, but the entire, not just the Department of Navy, actually, this one's the Department of Defense program. The entire Department of Defense offers grants. So anywhere you are nationally, you can kind of let us know if you're interested in getting involved in these types of programs, and there is funding and mentorship potentially available for your programs. Next, I want to talk about internships and scholarships. We have high school internship programs. We have college internship programs. Our science internship, our high school program is called the Science and Engineering Apprenticeship Program. Our high school program is called the Naval Research Enterprise Internship Program. The applications are open for these now. You can go check those out. We also have the Smart Scholarship Program. That's a full ride scholarship, provides tuition, books, housing, the whole shebang. This last year, specifically within Philadelphia, we did something a little different, and we actually had educators, high school educators, come into the workforce and work with us alongside the interns. That was in a program called the Naval Education Workplace Training Program. I'm happy to announce that that program is going to be going on again this upcoming year. Again, these are all, with the exception of the Naval Education Workplace Training Program, or NEWT. That one is a Philadelphia specific program for the time being, but all the other programs are national programs, and there are Department of Navy labs and Department of Defense labs scattered all around the United States, and folks can take advantage of those opportunities and more. So that was a very high level, very kind of brief, really, version of what we do. Really, when you look at what we do a lot more than that. We do science fair judging, we support capstone projects, we bring students into the workforce. One of the things that you see there in the center is somebody's actually staring at a engine on a ship through an augmented reality headset, and they can see it, but we can't see it, so they look a little silly because they're crawling around on the floor. We go to schools, we talk to students, we run summer camp programs, we run after-school programs. There is a lot of things that we are involved in, and we've got programs ranging anywhere from cybersecurity to wave mechanics to aquaponics. The last thing that I want to talk about in this kind of opportunities portion of the talk is our educator workshops. So the United States Naval Academy has been training educators and doing these workshops with STEM demonstrations for a few years now. And we are hoping to implement that in the fall within Philadelphia. And again, this is a national program. So it's not just Philadelphia who's doing these educator workshops, but these workshops are scattered around the country. For educators, there are $200 stipends to participate, as well as you get a set of demonstration materials, not just for yourself to do the workshop, but also a classroom set, which is 20 copies of the demonstration materials. Really briefly, we're going to go through some of those demonstrations at the end of this. And what you're going to find out is those demonstration materials are very basic. They're very simple because you don't need complex materials or complex technology. You don't necessarily need robots to explain a lot of different physical phenomena, a lot of different technical and scientific concepts. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. For now, I want to shift gears and talk about how did we get there. So it wasn't always like this. I started doing outreach in 2012 within the Naval Surface Warfare Center Philadelphia division. It wasn't even called that back then. I was met with very limited scope and reason for why we did outreach. Essentially, we did outreach to hire people. We were really only engaged in high school and college students. There was a little bit of stuff that we did with middle school students within the Perch program, because that was a pretty old program of ours. But I said, you know, why are we doing outreach only at this high school level? Can I go to middle school? And basically I was told no. I had a colleague who had a neighbor, lived in South Philly, and the neighbor worked as a teacher in North Philly. And ultimately, we just kind of did what I would call guerrilla outreach. We did kind of under the radar outreach. It wasn't approved by the organization. We just started doing a thing. And ultimately, that snowballed. We started trying to push back. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes is how can you achieve a successful STEM outreach program, do all of these things, at the local, at least at the local level, right? But ultimately, hopefully grow into something larger than that. A lot of that is driven through organizational change, and a lot of that comes from leadership. So a group of us just basically decided to confront our own leadership within our organization to create this organizational change. We were all either doing outreach that was kind of the same old thing. We had internships and we were doing Perch, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And everything else was not really approved. Everything else, we were still doing the outreach. We knew people within the organization who was doing the outreach. And a lot of these people were doing it in their own hours, during their own time, utilizing their own resources, going to the dollar store and getting materials, going to the hardware store and picking up materials. And so all this stuff was just scattered around in people's basements and things like that, right? And we said, you know, we really need to get buy-in from leadership and try to change this culture because we know we can do more. So this really was driven from the working level. You don't see a whole lot of organizational shifts like that from the working level. So we did something where we all got together in a room, those of us who were doing outreach, those of us who were really passionate about it, and we drafted 2 documents. We drafted a outreach charter, and we also drafted a strategic plan that supported that charter. The charter had a signature at the bottom of it. The outreach, the strategic plan came with the charter, but didn't necessarily require that own separate signature. Again, those things were kind of strategic. So we had to answer the following question: why do we do outreach? And to make this happen, we had to answer that question for ourselves first. So we all sat around in the room. We had a lot of opinions on why we do outreach, and we started documenting those. We literally started sticking sticky notes up on boards, jotting things down, and this came to a few different things. We learned that there were the easy sells for leadership, and then there were these new things that really nobody was talking about. So the easy sells were the things that leadership was really predispositioned to support. They knew they needed to hire people. So hiring was definitely something that they needed to do. That one was simple. Nobody was questioning that, why we do outreach for hiring. We knew that we had a retiring generation. The boomers were retiring. We needed to replace those. We needed, young students coming in and being aware of what we do, being inspired by the missions that we do and the technology that we're developing or utilizing on a day-to-day basis. Diversity. We knew that leadership was kind of predispositioned to promote diversity within the organization, and we knew that we wanted to concentrate on diversity because if we looked around the organization, what we saw wasn't necessarily reflective of what Philadelphia actually was, and that needed to change. Then we have the novel selves. These were things that maybe were unexpected benefits of outreach. We saw it as a means to develop the workforce, and really that came from us sitting down around that room and understanding that we were gaining benefits from doing outreach. I'm going to talk more about this a little bit later in the second half of this, so just keep that in the back of your mind for now. Technical literacy. So we were promoting technical literacy for those engaged in outreach. You can tie this in with scientific literacy. And if you're thinking, okay, what is technical literacy or scientific literacy and why do we need it? Let me introduce you to anti-vaccination speeches, right? There's a lot of kind of anti-science things going on within the local community. This isn't new. It's not just a local community, right? It's a national problem, quite possibly an international problem. So we knew that we wanted to promote technical literacy and that we were a technical organization. So we had scientists, we had engineers who are following the scientific process, who are following the engineering design process, and being able to explain not just science and technology concepts to the general community, but to also let them kind of pull back the curtain and demystify science and technology a little bit, right? It's one thing if I'm sitting there and saying, oh, you know, we've got this robot, has an Arduino on it and has this control system and blah, 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 blah. But it's very something else if I can put something in your hand that's something very basic, something that you recognize, and show it to you in a way that you've never seen it before, or it surprises you in a way. So hopefully I'm going to do that in a little bit and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Job satisfaction. Personally, we were certainly getting job satisfaction from doing the outreach. We wouldn't have been doing it outside of our normal working days, right? And committing our own funds to it if we didn't enjoy doing it. And by making that an official part of the job, then we were able to really promote STEM outreach as a means to achieve job satisfaction within the workforce. STEM outreach is fun, and those engaged in it generally have a pretty good time. I've never known this to not be true. And then finally, creating a community, not just a community within the organization. That was certainly important. And certainly by doing STEM outreach events and things like that, all of a sudden you had folks from different departments that may not know each other at all, that weren't communicating with each other, had no really reason to communicate with each other, or at least they didn't know it, because I've definitely met people in different parts of the organization that have really benefited my day-to-day job. And if I had known they were there earlier, I certainly would have taken advantage of them. This is kind of the downfalls of a very large organization. Again, we have this 2,700 people, but we also wanted to give back to the community and be more interconnected with the community. So I'm using this term rather loosely here. Okay, so one of the questions that we were expecting, because if you're going to sell this to leadership, you know, you need to think about, okay, what are the reasons why we do outreach, but also what is the pushback that we're expecting to get? And one of the things that I know and I've always heard in meetings is, what do you need? And then it's always ended with the word "from me," because it's not just what you need, it's what is it really going to cost me? And so we really needed to define that next. So how much is it going to cost? This is based on the scope and the size of your individual organizations. We were already doing a lot of this on our own time because we believed in it. And so all we had to do was identify that and then monetize it. The organization was already benefiting from what we were doing, but nobody had really laid it out before. So this really comes with time and money. So there's the cost of materials and things like that, right? But maybe more pronounced is the time and effort that people are putting in to achieve these goals. And so if we put a hourly charge rate to that, right? All of a sudden we could monetize that. And when we started doing things like, okay, you're not going to support all the outreach that we do. We're still going to do some of it on a volunteer basis, but maybe you support 50% of it, 25% of it. And so then all of a sudden you can have those types of conversations with leaders, with management within your workforce. Is this going to get in the way? Outreach doesn't just take money, it takes time. And so one of the questions was, is this going to get in the way of the work that we do? In some cases, right, we have folks who are getting pulled away at the last minute to go support a ship in Japan because the electrical system on the ship has some sort of problem and the ship can't move anymore. And we need to fix this so that we can get back to doing the mission. That kind of stuff's very important, right? We can't get in the way of that. And so the answer was surprisingly no, it's not going to get in the way. And I want to talk a little bit about how we achieve that. So back to that original question, what do you need from me? The real answer was support. And so from the leadership side, we really were only looking for support at first, and then we can go from there. So that was why we really concentrated on drafting these documents. There are three pieces of the documents. By the way, this first one, or this one thing that you see on the page here, this is our entire charter. It's only 2 pages long. The first page is kind of the meat. That is all of the reasons why we do outreach at a very high level. And really in the strategic plan, we broke that out into more depth and also made those actionable things for us. At the bottom is a signature line. Because we're a military organization, we had a civilian side and a military side. That's pretty common within the Department of Defense. So we had 2 signature lines. We had our technical director signing it, and we had our captain signing it. And then the second page was split into 2 sections. One was references, and these were pulled from everywhere. They were pulled from federal, state, local governments. We went as high as we could and as deep as we could, and then kind of dwindled down back to our organization and said, okay, the president wants to do this, president of the United States, right? And then the Department of the Secretary of Defense wants to do this. And so we started dwindling down, and we even looked at not just local state information, but also nationally, different types of state information. And then the bottom section was just authors. We pulled authors and we gave folks who were doing outreach already, who were already engaged, a voice, and they aided in developing this document. And the other thing that they did was we pulled them from every department, so that every department was represented in the drafting of those documents. So it wasn't just leadership saying, no, you can't do this. It was leadership saying no to an individual from every single department. And that's a much harder thing to do. Okay, so how do we actually pull this off? Because once we get leadership to support, we actually have to make it happen, right? So the next thing we had to do was get out ahead of any questions that were going to come our way. At the end of the day, outreach has a cost associated with it, right? It's not just what you need, but it's what do you need from me. So we needed nouns and verbs. We needed people, places, things, and actions. Who is already doing the outreach? Who is our target audience? Where is our target audience? That becomes a very interesting question specifically for Philadelphia. Where should our target audience be? What resources do we need? What stuff do we need? How much does that stuff cost? Who are our partners? How do we get the people to the places to do the things? And what do we need to do to get all of this to happen? The first thing that we started really kind of concentrating on was training our mentors, providing both formal and informal training for mentors. The formal trainings, I say it's simple, but it's not, right? Because there's complexities with that. But formal training might be like, I have this robot, this is how you build it. You saw a picture of a formal training event already for the Sea Glide program. Informal training might be more like, you got this. It's okay. I know that you're nervous, but you got this. So having those conversations and those really personal conversations became important. We knew we needed to retrain our leaders. So it wasn't enough to get support at the highest levels of leadership. That's where we started. But we really needed to kind of retrain the leaders. And part of that was really trying to break down barriers. Who is saying no and why are they saying no? Don't just react to them saying no, but really understand why they're saying no and what are the barriers in place and how can we not circumnavigate them, but really break them down or kind of meet them so that we're being more flexible. We needed to track metrics. Ultimately, we got to be able to provide this information, these results back to leadership, and not just leadership, but also the workforce itself too. And we needed to market success as part of that. We needed to continue getting the workforce engagement, and we needed to continue getting the leadership support. So that was the first half, just the leadership part. Now we actually have to get the people to do the things, and that requires mentorship. There's a little bit of if you build it, they will come, but that only gets you so far. So there are going to be those motivated people who are really interested in doing outreach, and they want to go support this thing, or maybe they want to go to their kid's school or whatever it is. But there's also going to be these internal barriers within the workforce itself. So you've already seen this slide. Redoing it in a different way. So the first thing that we wanted to really talk to the workforce about is there are benefits to doing this outreach. For us sitting around that table when we were going through that process, we were developing soft skills. We learned that we were developing soft skills. We were developing presentation skills. We were developing communication skills. We were developing organizational skills, and almost like project management kind of skills from just doing outreach. And for those who are new in their career, so I actually speak to all the new hires in our organization. I did that earlier today. I basically tell them this is an opportunity for you to step into a leadership role as a new hire straight out of college. That's a very unique kind of opportunity to kind of start developing some of these skills. Not only were we developing the soft skills, but we're developing some of those technical skills. So even though we were talking about technical literacy of the community, we also need to concentrate on, gosh, how good are you technically within your job? I mean, you're an engineer, I get that, but ultimately we need to, if you can explain a technical concept to a third grader, you've probably mastered it. Because getting a third grader to understand these really complex concepts, and I've done extremely complicated concepts with very young students, and if you explain it in a certain way, they will get these really complicated concepts. The next part was job satisfaction. I didn't just want to talk about job satisfaction, but I want the mentors who are already experiencing some of that job satisfaction to then talk to the other mentors so that they get that job satisfaction as well, or and can talk to them about the job satisfaction that they're getting. And then community, again, I talked about reaching out into the community, but also we wanted to develop that community so that the mentors were talking to each other. They're talking to each other in a safe environment. We developed a couple different teams. We developed a advisory team and a strategic team to really hold myself accountable is a big part of it. But also to kind of see, are we in the right direction? Are we headed in the right direction? What do we need to do? And then how do we reach the workforce who are interested in doing these events, or how do we talk to them about it or encourage people to do it? This is the biggest problem I have with mentors, is mentors saying, I don't know how. And let me give an example here. I have mechanical engineers who've told me they don't know anything about robotics, and I'm talking about them going to a school and talking with fifth graders. And I have to explain to a mechanical engineer that they know more about robots than a fifth grader does. There is a major imposter syndrome, and I found a lot of value in just identifying that imposter syndrome and getting over that #1 barrier, which is really competence building. So ensuring mentors that they can do it. Maybe it's the first time they go, maybe they need a buddy and see how they do it. Just to kind of get that confidence. Maybe they need training and resources. Regardless, having training resources in place can go a long way. But a lot of times it's just that confidence building aspect, telling people, hey, you can do it. Sharing some of these best practices and things like that, creating that community that I was talking about. Also creating opportunities for all. Even though we're 2,700 people in the organization and it's over 50% scientists and engineers, there are still another 1,000 or so folks who are in STEM adjacent or non-STEM career fields, and they want to be involved. And there's no reason they can't be. We started talking to folks about STEM and STEM adjacent opportunities to get involved in outreach. And STEM adjacent opportunities might be judging a robotics competition. If I give you a rubric and I tell you a team needs to get from point A to point B and do this, this, and this, and you can record the times, pretty much anybody can do that. You don't need a STEM degree to do that kind of stuff. So folks were getting involved in our programs, whether they had STEM degrees or not, and they're still kind of supporting the mission of STEM outreach. Flexibility. So earlier I talked about how do we get past like the boy, I don't know, or the no police kind of situation. And a lot of that is really providing flexible opportunities. So I need to be ready for someone to say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I have this work commitment. I got pulled away for travel. Something's happening. I just can't do this anymore. And I thought I was going to, and I'm sorry. If I can break down that barrier so that people don't feel upset about that. Actually, somebody was just telling me today, they are doing a training event today for robotics and within the school district of Philadelphia. And somebody stood in front of these teachers at the school district event and said, mentors might reach out to you and they'll say, they're going to come once a week. And I tell them, no, don't come once a week, come once every 2 weeks. So whatever commitment that they're kind of expecting or wanting to do, they cut it in half because they know that a lot of times things are going to come up. These are working professionals. This isn't their full-time job. And so providing that flexibility for folks so that you can kind of pull them back and say, it's okay. You can have these short-term engagement opportunities or long-term engagement opportunities. If you have to back out, it's not the end of the world. If you just want to volunteer at your kid's school, that's fine. Don't block them from doing those types of things. It all kind of goes into that broader portfolio. It all matters. And then depending on how your organization's set up, they maybe need separate funding to charge to. So I don't know if you, within your own organizations, if you have charge lines, things like that, you do still have to consider where is this money going to come from? And part of that goes back to the leadership conversations. Okay, so all the boring stuff aside, I have strategically been talking to you in the dining room, and now I'm going to strategically talk to you in the kitchen. And I'm in a row home, so it's like 3 steps over. So if you are only seeing the presentation right now, it might be a good idea to maybe split the screen so you can see both me and the presentation. I'm sure there's a button for that somewhere. We're going to do the play part of this presentation. So we're going to do a few different STEM demonstrations. The first one is on acoustics. So I've got 2 glasses of water here. If I ding on one, makes a noise. Hopefully those sounded a little bit different to your ear. I've got one filled up a little higher than the other one. So the one that is a little bit lower makes a higher pitch. That's just because there's more air in it. I'm going to pour some more water in it just to make it the same height. So now it will make the same pitch. By the way, I'm just dinging this with a metal straw in case you're wondering what this is. we have a system in the Department of Navy, and it uses bubbles. And it uses bubbles to change the acoustic properties of the ship through the water. So I've got some, oh, there it is, Alka-Seltzer right here. It's just normal Alka-Seltzer. And I'm just going to drop a tablet into one of these. And hopefully, as it's releasing the bubbles from the Alka-Seltzer tablet, hopefully you'll start to hear a difference. That was the original without the Alka-Seltzer. That one should sound deader to you. The one with the bubbles in it doesn't ring as much. There isn't as much resonance within it. And so within the Department of Navy, I'm going to be up here now, within the Department of Navy, we have a system called the Prairie Massacre. And essentially it has these belts on the side of a ship. It releases bubbles through the water as the ship goes through the water, and it starts deadening some of the resonance, some of that acoustic energy as the ship moves through the water. And there's also a prairie system, which is basically the same thing, except for it's expelling bubbles out of a propeller on the back end of the ship. Put those two things together, the Massacre system and the prairie system, it becomes the Prairie Massacre system. It's a really weird name. I don't know exactly why it's called that. Somebody probably does. But this is a good example, right? It's a very basic STEM demonstration, 2 glasses of water, something to ding it with, could be a spoon, and a tablet of Alka-Seltzer, and that's the whole demonstration. And now I've talked and you've witnessed and listened to a description of a very complex system where it's really scattering some of that acoustic energy and things like that. And you can understand that on a little bit simpler level. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the Venturi effect. I'm sorry, a lot of these are like fluids-based things because I'm a fluid dynamicist, so I decided to do fluids things. We do a lot more stuff too. We do electricity and things like that, but I'm going to do what I know. So I've got 2 beds of coffee stirrers here. I don't have to have the coffee stirrers there. They're kind of optional. I'm really just doing that so that you kind of see the lateral motion of these 2 cans a little bit better than if I didn't have them there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick these 2 cans next to each other. And if I blow through the center of the 2 cans, what happens is you might think that, okay, if I'm blowing in the center, maybe like the cans will go out like this. You can start making predictions and things like that, right? But if I get down low and I blow between the 2 cans, we see they don't go out. They actually come together. I'm going to do it again. And so that's something called the Venturi effect. And essentially what I'm doing is in between my 2 cans, I'm blowing. And when I'm blowing, I'm creating an area of fast moving air. And it's called dynamic pressure, moving pressure. But I'm actually increasing the pressure between the 2 cans. And so outside of the 2 cans, on the other side, and I'll just show you one for now. So if I've got my fast moving air here, and on the outside, I've got really no moving air. This is called a static pressure condition. So basically I've got a high pressure between the 2 cans, low pressure on the backside, and actually pulls them together. Okay, why should we care? Why is that important? Well, in 2007, a United States submarine collided with a Japanese tanker. Now, this was the situation that had occurred. The submarine was sitting there doing the thing that submarines do, which is basically nothing except for just sitting somewhere really quietly and listening. So it was hidden in the water, underneath the water, and it was just sitting there and listening. And a tanker, and that's a picture of the Japanese tanker that collided with the submarine. It was moving very fast and pulling a lot of water with it. And so all of a sudden you had a situation where instead of like this, it looks maybe a little bit more like this, where here's my submarine, here's my ship, and my ship is moving over the submarine. And when it creates that motion, it's pulling water in between the submarine and the ship. And so what happened was a lifting force got created and the submarine actually collided with the tanker. The submarine wasn't moving at all and the ship was just doing its thing, but it actually created a lifting force, which was due to the Venturi effect. Whenever I first started with the Navy, this was something that they actually asked some of us who were doing computational fluid dynamics, basically creating computer models for fluids to model this scenario, because they really wanted to understand why this submarine collided with this tanker. And the answer was this Venturi effect, which I guess you could do a really complicated and expensive computer model on, or you can just take two cans and blow between them and get the same answer. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is Bernoulli, and this is kind of a weird demonstration. It's really weird just because it's Zoom. So I'm going to turn on a blow dryer, and what's going to happen is you might hear it when it first clicks on. It's going to make noise. But Zoom has this neat feature in it where if there's some sort of background noise, let's say you had like construction or something outside of your home, it's actually designed to constantly be listening to the noise and identify what is noise and what is somebody speaking, and it will actually remove that noise. And so for hair dryers actually make a really nice white noise. It's going to remove that noise. So the hair dryer is going to be on. I promise it's on and it's making noise, but I'm going to be yelling. I'm going to be kind of raising my voice so that you can still hear me. And really it's just so I can hear me, I guess. I don't know. But I don't have to yell. It's more psychological for myself, I guess. I don't know. But ultimately you aren't going to hear the blow dryer. Okay, so, whoops, sorry. So I'm going to turn on the blow dryer. The blow dryer making the noise, by the way, is not the demonstration. This is just a neat thing that Zoom does, and I had to learn how it worked and why I couldn't hear anything anymore. Ultimately, I've got the blow dryer on now, in case you can't tell, I don't know. And I've got a ping pong ball here. And I'm just gonna set that ping pong ball right there. So earlier, I talked about that dynamic or moving pressure, and then I also talked about the static pressure. Now, you can see that the ping pong ball is levitating. I can even kind of like push it with my finger if I can catch it. And it'll still stay within this tube of air that's being blown by the hair dryer. Now, that's not the interesting part. It's kind of pseudo interesting, right? Because it's a levitating ball, and that's kind of fun, right? There's no strings attached. I promise it's not a magic trick. But that moving dynamic pressure blowing the ball up, outside of that, there's some static pressure. And so Bernoulli tells us if we have a dynamic pressure, let's see if I can get my animations to work. Uh-oh. There we go. So this is an airfoil. So if you took a wing on an aircraft and cut it in half, you would see this cross-sectional shape, and I've got some streamlines shown over the airfoil. And the way that airplanes work is that you have a kind of a shorter path on the bottom side of that airfoil and a longer path on the top side of that airfoil. So on the bottom side, it all has to get to the same point at the same time. So on the bottom side, it moves a little bit slower than the faster side. And ultimately that creates a force called lift, which pulls the wing up. Okay, so that's just how airplanes work. And what's happening there is that's that Bernoulli equation piece, right? It's this static pressure and the dynamic pressure, the two things added together has to stay constant. And so as that wing has this kind of faster air moving on top of it, it wants to move toward the area of the faster air. So when I've got my ball, floating on my hair dryer, even if I'm pushing on it with an external force, it stays stable, because what happens is it moves out of that area, out of that faster moving region to the slower moving region, and
correcting force actually pulls it back in. So even if I'm pushing on the ball, it'll pull it back toward the center. So I can prove this to you by now turning my hair dryer, and now I've got nothing underneath it, nothing on top of it. It's just floating off to the side, and I can actually move this ball around from side to side. If I go too far, gravity takes over. So what's happening there? Essentially what's happening is I've got my ball, it's in my hair dryer. I'm sorry, these are just actually what my drawing looks like. So you'll have to deal with my hand drawings. It's got gravity pulling on it. And even if I have it at an angle and I'm blowing air and I'm keeping that ball in a stable region, even if gravity's pulling it down, because I've got this faster moving air, this is the ball getting pulled down, right? But I've got this faster moving air coming on top of it, it actually creates a correcting force. And so it tries to pull it back. That's that lifting force again. It tries to pull it back into the realm of the hairdryer. That's all I have. I just wanted to do a few different fun little STEM demonstrations. This is what we do. We go to schools and we talk about this stuff. Once we kind of talk about these physical phenomena, we can pull things out like this pressure transducer and talk about how we measure pressures on ships for all these different reasons, for piping systems, for whatever it is. We have centralized systems that control them. We have things that power them. This is what we do. This is kind of our bread and butter. But I'll go ahead and pause there. I don't have too much time, but I got some time for questions if there are any questions. Thank you for explaining how to actually click on the screen in the chat, Emily. I appreciate that. Since we have like a few minutes, if there are no other questions.
Hi, Tristan.
Yeah.
I think someone had a question earlier. They asked, what challenges do students, like girls or students of color, face to get involved in robotics, and how does your organization aim to tackle these problems to increase accessibility?
Love
like
that.
These challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So we work with a few different schools, like the Philadelphia High School for Girls. We have a few all girls teams that it's just girls on the team doing robotics. But yes, there's still this kind of barrier, this stigma of girls getting involved in robotics, and that we do have to kind of bridge that gap. So one thing that we've been looking into, there was some research out of Purdue that actually the interest of girls going into robotics increases if the program is centered in soft robotics. So one thing that we're looking to do in the upcoming year is to try to work a little bit more in the soft robotics realm, because we think that that really could increase the interest and efficacy of girls in the robotics, doing robotics outreach.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, I can do fun experiments all day, so I got 5 minutes. So unless anybody has any, and I'm in a kitchen, so you'll have to excuse me being in a small row home kitchen. I'm pulling back the curtain on the Zoom world, right? But one thing that's also fun, I didn't do this demonstration, but I had it lined up and figured I could do it if I had time, is I've got basically just a bottle of water here. It's mostly full. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a playing card on it. It looks a little bit weird. This is just a normal playing card. It's a waterproof playing card though. So it looks a little bit weird because it's clear, but I promise it's just a normal playing card. I got waterproof because I'm doing this with it, and the water doesn't come out. So what's happening there, and by the way, this is a good for like a bar trick or something if you want to bet somebody that something isn't going to dump out on you, is there is the littlest bit of air in here. And when I flip this over, air actually escapes out of the playing card. And this column of water here doesn't weigh as much as just general atmospheric pressure. So what's happening in here, there's actually a vacuum in here now that I dumped this upside down. So all the air that was in this bottle escaped when I flipped it upside down. But essentially there's a pressure difference. Again, we're just talking about pressures here, where the column of water above the playing card isn't as much pressure as all of the air that you experience in a normal day-to-day basis. The other fun thing is that you can also poke a hole, and I don't know if you can see this, but I poked a hole in the head of the king here. And you can do the same thing, even if there's a hole. Again, a little bit of water will escape. But this is a good bet that you can get a toothpick, if you go really carefully, actually into the bottle of water through a playing card and keep it all together. So now the toothpick is floating in the bottle of water. So fun little things that look like magic, but it isn't, it's just science. But again, if I can do these kind of simple things with really simple materials, playing cards, toothpicks, glasses, Alka-Seltzer, a couple cans, right? There's a lot of kind of demystifying science and technology. If I can actually explain what's going on while you're seeing it, unfortunately it ruins magic, right? But it's fun, and so it's a good way to demonstrate things. Would that work with a carbonated drink? I don't know. That's a great question. I've never tried it with a carbonated drink. And this is another thing that I tell mentors is it's okay to not to know the answer to something. It sounds scary, especially if you're an educator, to not know the answer to something. But then you just say, okay, let's go find it out together, right? So let's go find a carbonated drink and let's go try it. And if it works, then okay, it's the same principles. But if it doesn't work, oh, now we have something to talk about, because that's more interesting because it's got these little bubbles in it and things like that. So I don't know what's going on with those bubbles. That's a really interesting question. I'm going to try that later and then hope that I don't spill out all of my carbonated drink. All right, we got like 2 minutes left. So thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really wonderful. We just appreciate your time and presenting with us. And my mind was blown. It's been a while since I've seen like very basic science, and it's very magical. So I appreciate you breaking that down for us and teaching us a bit more about your organization. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.